Housing benefits and paying rent. You can find out the amount of your rent from your rental agreement. Rent is paid to the rent payment account on the day mentioned in the rental agreement. Rent is paid out of your income. Income includes the salary you receive from work, Kela's benefits, for example, unemployment benefit, pension, family benefits, or other allowances, or other wealth that you have. Wealth includes savings in your bank account, fund units, savings insurances, and securities. If your earnings are insufficient to pay your rent, for example, because your salary is low and you have expensive rent, you can apply for housing allowance from Kela. The amount of housing allowance depends on the size of your income and rent, as well as the region you live in. Housing allowance will never cover the entire rent. Limits for the size of the rent vary between the different regions of Finland. It is more expensive to live in bigger cities than in the countryside and smaller towns. You can apply for housing allowance under the housing benefits section on Kela's website. If Kela grants you housing allowance, the amount of your housing allowance can be found in the section Housing Allowance Decisions. You can access it under the section Decisions. Housing allowance can be paid to your bank account, which means that you will pay the entire rent on the due date. The housing allowance can also be paid directly to the landlord, and you will only have to pay the remainder of the rent after the housing allowance. The housing allowance decision is always made for 1 year at a time, so the amount of your housing allowance will remain the same for the entire year as long as your income and family situation do not change and you live in the same apartment. However, in some situations, a person's income and housing allowance are not enough for rent and living. In such situations, it is possible to apply for basic social assistance from Kela. Basic social assistance is last resort assistance, intended to cover essential living expenses on a short-term basis. Essential living expenses include rent, electricity bills, home insurance, food costs, clothing, medical and healthcare expenses, telephone, internet, and public transport tickets. It is also possible to apply for social assistance for moving costs and the rental security deposit. Essential expenses do not include new telephones, TVs, furniture, or vacations, among other things. Even if you had purchased necessary devices in installments, the installments are not considered essential expenses in basic social assistance. The amount of social assistance may vary from month to month, as the amount is determined by the disposable income for each month. Social assistance may cover the full amount of the rent that you have to pay after the housing allowance, but it may also be that even after the housing allowance and social assistance, you will still need to pay a part of the rent. Social assistance can also be paid directly to the landlord, which means that it is extremely important to check how much rent you will have to pay each month. This amount can be seen in the social assistance decision. The amount you actually have to pay is your rent minus housing allowance minus social assistance. However, the easiest way is to ask for the entire social assistance to be paid into your bank account and pay the same amount each month, which is the amount of rent after the housing allowance. If you have a difficult financial situation and many bills to pay, the most important bill to pay is always rent. If you do not pay your rent, you may be evicted, which makes it very difficult to find a new apartment. Seek help immediately if you have trouble paying your bills. Kela and the municipal social care will help you.